Chris wiped the sweat and blood from his face with the back of his hand, feeling the metallic taste in his mouth and the constant throbbing in his body. His muscles were exhausted, and it hadn't been for the herbal mixtures he had drunk earlier, he would have been out a long time ago. No matter how euphoric he felt, and how much pain he was in, just a nuisance, he couldn't wait to get home. Three men walked in silence. Hunk had decided to drive the moment they got into the car that Wesker had used. The BSAA team was already on its way to a meeting point, and none of the soldiers in the vehicle reacted and seen a huge explosion in the lab, strong enough to interfere even from where they were, although they were considerable distance away. Chris sighed in relief and exhaustion when the explosion actually happened. His team had mentioned finding his sister next to a knocked-out child before they left, and Sherry was already in the air with the BSAA team rescue, so they didn't really care about the rest. Chris sighed in relief and exhaustion from the explosion, but for Leon, for his part, he showed no reaction. He just remained motionless in his seat, staring at the forest through the vehicle's window. The only thing indicated that he was awake were his open eyes, which occasionally blinked. He felt lost. Perhaps it was not the best word to describe it. Perhaps empty would be a better description. He could even try to ignore it for now. But now that Wesker was dead, they could continue with this initial control plan, which Wesker would later lead with Alia. In other words, he was no longer needed, and Hunk, like him, would ask the question, what would he like to do now? They would say stay with the organization, of course, although Walter had already shown a distaste for the option more than once. It was still an opportunity. However, they would go and be also presented with the freedom no longer needed. They would be free to rejoin the society, and considering how much money they both had, even after using part of it for the organization, they could go anywhere they wanted. No worries. And that was scary. Free for what? He should feel relief, the sense of victory. And yes, he did. Just thinking about all the people that he had saved by killing Wesker was enough to make him feel satisfied. At the same time, it was also something vital that had been ripped away from him. Of course, he still had to deal with William. He still didn't know how exactly it would play out, but he doubted the man would follow in Albert's footsteps, and if he did, then he just had to kill him. There was also Ida. The woman was good and definitely not an idiot. With all the negative impact that Wesker's death and the destruction of Umbrella will cause, as well as the command of his organization now in power, she would go into hiding. No more jobs for her. He hoped, however, that she would accept something just the same, so just to put an end to it once and for all. Well, it would have depended on what Hunk decided in the future. The agent sighed, running his hand through his hair. As much as he tried not to think about it, his mind insisted on tormenting him with the after. If Ada died, if William's affair was resolved, then what would be left of him? He was a soldier without a war. Leon ran his tongue along the teeth and as he remembered Sherry, Claire, and the emptiness in his heart receded slightly as they both fulfilled his thoughts. Maybe he could give it a chance? For what? He was afraid to say. As they approached the extraction point, the silhouette of the helicopters appeared and threw the smoke and debris, much to the relief of the soldiers. The approach of the Free drew attention, and some of Chris's men ran towards him, worried about his condition and injuries, but happy that he was okay. Leon and Hunk watched for a few moments before they looked at each other and walked towards the support helicopter, where Mike was leaning on his back next to the helicopter's pilot door. "Hunk, go, sir," Mike greeted them, and despite the helmet goggles that hid for most of his face, you could see uneasy manner, probably surprised that they were both without their masks. "Mike," Leon greeted him, taking a seat at the side of the helicopter, sighing slightly. He rested his arm on his thigh, while the other lazily began to remove his blood-stained vest. "Good to see you here. What about the rest of the team?" Hunk said, his tone professional, but showing a certain weariness. As tired and wounded as Albert was, the son of the bitch was still fucking strong. "Finishing up Our UAVs did a sweep of 50 kilometers as you requested. The infected didn't get that far, but they did spread a lot, Mike explained, looking a little uncertain as he alternated his gaze between the two agents with some hesitation. Leon suppressed a sigh, and he admitted that it was a bit strange. William has been discovered. Alia had took the liberty of sending the team to the location. He should be back by now, Mike said. So he's still alive? Shit, Leon said dramatically, drawing a snort from Hunk. Malnourished, dehydrated as far as I know. His leg is fucked up and he looks anemic. But other than that, he's fine, he explained. Good, let's wait for the rest of the team on standby, Hunk said, sitting down on one of the seats on the helicopter, resting both of his arms on his thighs. And how about, Mike asked. Hunk and Leon just exchanged an amused glance, and Leon snorted smugly. Mission accomplished, soldier, he said, completely removing his vest and leaving it on the ground next to his leg. He grunted softly in pain, as much as he would love never to admit it. That son of the bitch Wesker was stronger than he looked. His combat jacket was all black and made out of material resistant to cuts and abrasions. He had ballistic plates inserted in vital areas such as the chest and back, and the sleeves were lifted and ended with tactical gloves that formed a firm grip protection against the impacts. Despite this, along with the tactical vest, he still had suffered lacerations around his torso and the blows. We can go to that bar, when we get back. It's still at Hunk's lab, he said, ignoring the neutral look on his ever-so-serious partner on that ugly face. Why on my lab? He asked. Leon shrugged. Why not on yours? He asked back. You taste drinker is an insult. It's the least you can do. Hunk didn't react. He just shook his head slightly. There is nothing wrong with tequila. The problem wasn't the tequila. The problem was the brand. Kirkland, really? It looks like I'm drinking something out of the hospital, Leon said, wiping his face with the damp gauze he had taken from the first aid kit right beside him. Kirkland, sir? Why not salsa? Or Don Julio? Mike said, surprise evident in his voice, with a refinement of amusement. First, stop with the sir right now. Nobody cares. And secondly, because it has no taste, Leon answered for him, snorting out a laugh as he felt the shotgun shell hit his back. I don't drink to taste. I just want to get drunk as possible and quickly as possible, Hunk answered professionally again, which made Leon roll his eyes. He always liked that when there were more people around. Oh, come on, are you going to say that you deny a good dose of Solonchone? Mike asked, a little more comfortable. Apparently, there were a few friendlier than the rumors and the appearances showed. You like vodka lover, my friend Mike? Leon asked with a smile, and Mike shrugged. I prefer the sake, but it's hard for me to find quality sake from where I come from, he said, and Leon shook his head in mild surprise. Sake? Ha! You don't look the type. I'll tell you, but it's surprisingly better than I thought, I'll admit, Hunk said, his face neutral, but in a better mood. I can't remember the last time I had a sake, but I can't give an opinion on that one, Leon said. Really? Well, I'll buy you a shot for the best sake of the bar has, Mike said, and Leon whistled. See, Hunk, you could learn a thing or two from Mike, Hunk said, pointing his middle finger at him. He claims to be my friend, but he won't buy me a drink. What about you? Mike asked. I like a good whiskey. Jack Daniels, Blue Label, Black Label, he replied, his eyes focusing on the helicopter ahead. Chris had been seeing the helicopter for a few minutes, and out of it came Claire, who was sitting next to the girl, who was unconscious. Several thoughts ran through her mind, the irony of seeing her in the same situation when they first met, always caring and protecting, before at the beginning, and now at the end. A slight concern staying at the girl. Her arms were dark and her nails saturated with what looked like blood, and from the wound, now covered on the woman's arm, it had a good idea as to why. And finally his heart now raced when he saw the woman again. Even though they hadn't been apart for that long, it was a relief to see her well, and his mind wandered to that insensate desire. You talk so much about my tastes. You have a taste in basic in that, Hunk teased in amusement. Leon clicked his tongue, grateful to have been pulled out of his thoughts, but at the same time frustrated for the same reason. Hunk, you prefer tea to good old coffee? Your opinion has automatically negated, what Leon said, as the silence lasted for a few seconds before being cut off again. I like tea, Mike said, and Leon looked at him slightly with wide eyes and grimaced that fringed pain. Traitor, he said. He could already feel Hunk smiling behind him. Leon shook his head, focused on his gaze forward, and his eyes had met Claire's. Without even realizing it, he had held his breath as he saw her staring steadily at him. The smile appeared on the woman's lips as she waved in the same direction, as Leon waved back, and how though he tried to hold it back, a small smile also appeared on his lips. He thought he was about to go over to her, checking on her even without even seeing she found fine. Talking about what? He didn't know. He can only think of something to use as an excuse just to get close. Apparently, however, that would be for another time. Hunk's team got in touch, indicating that the completion of their duties. The BSAA soon departed, and the soldiers began to gather. Well, let's go. William wants to talk with you, Mike said, as he noticed the helicopters already overhead. The cleanup team was arriving, and they couldn't do much for the time being, but they would prepare the area while Simmons prepared when they weren't ready. After all, he had looked like the hero. Leon exchanged one last look with Claire before stepping back a little and pulling her legs to the helicopter. The woman stared at him with a conflicted look, her eyebrows pressed together as he could see her insecurity, seeing him walk away, but he just signaled to her that he would see her later. With a sigh, he got up and sat one of the seats next to Hunk, who was calmly munching on a protein bar, ignoring Leon, who in turn was paying attention. With a sigh, he got up and one of the seats stood next to Hunk, who apparently looked at him. Hey, Simon, Leon began, sympathizing his name because he didn't even like being called that. What are you planning to do? Hunk glanced at him for a few seconds, always so stoic. If he hadn't noticed or considered the question, Leon would know how to read him better than he let on. Now he knew he was thinking. I still don't know, he replied. Come on, aren't you thinking about going back to your family? You don't have a brother? Sister? Hunk shook his head. No, my family's dead, and my mother probably doesn't even remember me, he said in a short, low, almost imperceptible sigh. And no, I don't have any brothers. I never wanted to. And why not? Hunk shrugged his question. But if you did, have you ever thought of what their names would be? That question made Hunk arch his eyebrow. Wait, why is that? I don't know. Curiosity. Like, if I could choose my sister's name, it'd be Simone. Hunk didn't say anything, but Leon just smiled the way he looked at him. That doesn't have to do with the fact that it's similar to my name, does it? Leon fringed ignorance. You value yourself too much. It would be Simone because we're two siblings. Hunk raised an eyebrow again. Then I could change my name to Sim2. Oh, nice one, was all Hunk said, before drawing a brief snort from Leon. Leon and Hunk were standing on top of the hill, watching the beach below, where the water waves broke gently on the sand, the sea breeze that caught an almost nostalgic freshness. For an example, 300 meters from the left where Leon collapsed trying to swim from that island to island where he did that survival test years ago. That beach was marked by the sweat from so many times he ran with the tree trunk on his back, marked with the blood that gushed from as many times he had fight 3-4 soldiers at once. He was beaten for the first in a few months. Leon crossed his arms, blinking a few times as stronger as gusts of wind hit him. His eyes ran over the landscape of the beach of the sea, looking at it like that. In that place, everything he had been through was almost as peaceful. Yet suppressed that snort was gaze focused on his boss's back, or perhaps ex-boss now. William was standing with his back to them, and didn't know any better. He had been say that too was observing the landscape. At the same time, it was incredible. It was also annoying how the same air of superiority from Albert resonated with William, even more so when he was like that, weakened, tired. "You know, I never planned this," William said, after a few minutes of standing there in pure silence. "All the plans were ideas. We did it. My brother's dead, and I'm still here." Leon knew enough about William to recognize when there was a change, whatever if this was his way of acting, his voice, however neutral and apathetic he seemed, but still had characteristics that marked out for him as human. And as for the first time, Leon could see what closely resembled something other than coldness. "The purpose you had has been fulfilled. You are no longer needed if you wish," William said. His voice was also inexpressive now. It had something extra to the intonation that Leon didn't quite know how to empathize. Hunk had always been pragmatic and silent, merely nodded and turned away, ready to head down the hill. He didn't know exactly how Hunk and William had come into contact. He had never asked, and frankly, he didn't care. But it was rather obvious that Hunk was more than just a soldier. Perhaps they had once something resembling friendship, or kind of rivalry. He didn't even know. And as much as Hunk didn't need the emotional goodbyes or justifications, he knew that his partner's choice would be. Walter himself had said that he'd be waiting for them inside the facility, now being rebuilt. For Hunk, he suspected that it was all about, but for him, he had no idea. Leon stood still, watching Hunk walk away, before finally turning to William. "Can I ask you a question, sir?" Leon spoke up after a few moments of silence. William gave the slightest reaction, merely signaling that he had heard them. "I am no longer in your command, Agent. You don't have to call me sir anymore," William said. Leon didn't show it, but he was pleased to hear it. He had enough of this shit. "I understand," he merely said. "Ask." Leon remained silent again, approaching with slow, calm steps until he stood a few places beside William. He was also watching the calm waves of the sea, his arms behind his back. "Why exactly did you turn against your own brother?" he asked in the question he should, but he should have asked because it was a decade ago. William somehow knew the question would be the same or similar, but he had still remained silent for a few moments, staring at the island of the horizon. "Part of what I said at the time was true. I never agreed, and I still won't agree with my brother's methods and thoughts, no matter how superior our blood is to you humans." He paused, seemingly to think about what to say, or choosing his best words. "And the other part?" Leon asked slightly, impatiently when William remained silent. "I wanted to prove him wrong. Out of all the answers, this one Leon took by surprise. He didn't show it. That I, whom he always saw as a flaw, was more than capable of overcoming him. And somewhere in the middle of it, I wanted to make him pay." Leon remained silent, observing William's words. He understood. If he were drunk, he could sympathize with him. William, like most people, was shaped by the past that at times was better than the dust. But of course, that was no excuse for everything, and his opinion, although changed for some extent, remained the same. "So at the end, it was just revenge," Leon said, crossing his arms in front of his chest. "I feel a sense of judgment," William said, although he didn't care. "No, I don't judge you, what you did. However, wrongly for the wrong reasons, still do it good in many places. You did real good. More than the fucking United Nations," Leon said. "You're not here to kill me? Why waste my time with this conversation?" William asked, and Leon just stared at him from time, staring deep into his blue eyes. What Leon saw there was the same thing he saw when he looked in the mirror a long time ago. Nothing. That was the life when he had nothing for you. That was the idea, but now I see you. Now I look in your eyes. I see that I didn't have to do that. You're already dying," Leon said, and as proof of what he just said, William just continued to stare at him, his eyes showing no reaction whatsoever. "Are you going to let me live? Are you getting soft, Kennedy? What a disappointment," William said, and Leon just snorted in duration as he noticed a lack of venom in his words. "And you're losing touch. I never said I'd let you live. Not after everything," he said, only showing his pistol. which had been hidden by crossing his arms. William stared at the gun for a few moments until he looked away. Leon blinked a few times, surprised. For a moment he thought that he had a hint of sadness within William's eyes. "You'd be stupid to let me live. Congratulations on exceeding my expectations." Leon laughed at the man's words, taking 2 slow steps backwards. William didn't turn to follow him. He just stood at the same place, staring at the horizon. "You know, I always thought you humans were fools, blinded by your emotions," William said, hearing the sound noises of the gun's safety latch being deactivated, and taking advantage of the fact that Leon couldn't see, but he smoothed his features, and what looked like the beginnings of a saddened smile appeared on his lips. "But now I think I understand a little. Albert was a miserable bastard, but we had the same blood. It's sad." Leon paid attention to the man's words, ensuring that at least he wouldn't listen to them when no one else would. And despite everything, he could be one of the few who remembered that William had once existed. It has all been what he could do, and promised himself when he pulled the trigger. William's body fell to the ground with a thud, and Leon stared at him for a few moments, his arms still raised, his gun still pointed at the reaction of the man that had been standing for moments ago. And with that, as much as he had resolved issues, he only did feel that it was truly the end. And for the first time, he no longer wanted to kill. Swallowing some saliva and pushing his thoughts aside, he put his gun in his waistband and turned around, walking down the hill at a calm pace. At the bottom of the hill, to his surprise, he found Walter sitting on a fallen log beside a small dirt road that led to the facility. The man looked well, tired of course, but it was hard to see a day when it looked but cheerful, despite the exquisite sadness on features. Or was that nostalgia? "Ghost," he greeted him, standing up and shaking the dust from his clothes. "Walt," Leon greeted him back, watching the man as they two went and met him. Walter's gaze lingered over the top of the hill for a few moments, before returning to Leon's eyes. "You know, I'm glad we're done with W1 plan, but I don't know. It's weird for me to say that I'm going to miss the asshole?" Walter asked. A faint smile appeared on Leon's lips. "No, in a bizarre way, I'll miss him too. The truth is, as much as he disliked William, it was as if another part of him had been ripped from his chest. I'll be mourning at his funeral, or if they burn his body. Anyway, that's not why I'm here," he said, putting his hands in his pockets of his pants. "I talked to Hunk. I tried to convince him to try and live a normal life. He still has some family out there, even if they don't remember him anymore." Leon nodded. He knew that he never had asked about the details, just as Hunk did the same. It wasn't necessary. It could be just a distraction. Also, it was like a silent agreement between the two of them. They less dug into their pasts for the better. "It didn't work out. I half expected it. You have a choice. You could stay, keep fighting, keep the peace now, that we won't have to worry about the chaos, endless intense days of training, blood and sweat, or you could take your money and just disappear from this life," Walter said, and Leon stared at the sky for a few moments. He was, facing the choice that he was still uncertain about making. "Look, it's almost stupid enough to let the other option, the two modified and the highly dangerous agents. Do you really think I'm that good to society? After everything?" he asked generally, and Walter sighed slightly, looking directly at Liam with a firm but not severe gaze. There was depth in those eyes that indicated he imagined some felt that way, or he would have asked that question. "Ghost, look, I'll be quite honest. I'm not saying that it's certain that you'll fit into a normal life. As if everything you've been through had been forgotten. No one's life went through what you lived through comes out unscathed. Fuck, it's amazing to think that you and Hunk haven't broken down at this point. Society as most people know it, but it may have not been when you find your place. But that doesn't mean you have a role to play in it." Leon kept his gaze fixed on Walter, observing his words, but skeptical. The idea of simply disappearing seemed tempting, but at the same time deeply wrong. He didn't even know if he could see himself out of the cycle of fighting. He had always been on the battlefield of living a mission. William had corrupted him, and bioterrorism scarred for what had been touched. It was more than a decade of constant fighting. Mere days were just rest in between, sometimes less, but you know how before there was still no time to bring some of that back to life. You are more than the product of the training and the battles you faced. Yes, William has turned you into a fighting machine, but you were also a human being, a man who is valued of life, who knows the darkness, but prefers to stay in the light. And the main thing is that, unlike you, many won't leave you alone. We both know it. Leon clenched his fist, still strong as an internal conflict. He wanted to believe, he really did, but everything he had experienced had left him deep doubts. What if I can't? What if I don't know how to be more than that? Walter nodded, understanding doubt. It's going to be hard, I'm not going to lie, but for fuck's sake, if you can face the tyrant with your bare hands, then you could face a boring Sunday afternoon staring at the fucking sunset. Walter smiled encouragingly, and although the smile wasn't reciprocated, Leon snorted a good humor. Look, what will change is what can change, is how you choose to live from now on. You could keep fighting if that's all you still feel like doing. You have Hunk's contact and my contact, Alia's. You know our frequency here is at the BSAA. Anytime you felt like you wanted, you can call us. As much as I don't want this to happen, but you can also decide now that it's time to live for your life. Walter's words went deep, making him really think and rethink. He really wanted that. A life where he couldn't always have to look over his shoulder and expect an attack at every corner or a shot of every step he took. He was afraid of being normal, afraid of slowing down and not being able to dodge the next claw. In the last decade, he was the agent who changed the world, and who few knew, and he was afraid of disappearing altogether. Thanks, Walt, that helped, he said after a while, sighing slightly, but raising his head and puffing out his chest. Walter smiled and nodded at him. So I ask you again, what are you going to do? He asked. Leon hesitated at first, but then sighed and made the decision. I think I'll try a normal life. The answer made Walter smile with satisfaction. Ah, thank God, one of you listened. Here, he said, took a bunch of keys from his back pocket and tossed them towards Leon, who caught the keys and arched an eyebrow in confusion. What's this? Richard London, isolated enough for you, but not too far from establishments. I'll send you the coordinates later, Walter said quickly, leaving Leon more confused. What is this? He asked, and the man rolled his eyes. Weren't you supposed to be a genius? It's your new house. It caught him off guard. His surprise worried his eyes alternated between the keys and Walter's face. What? Think of it as a gift, Walter said, and the words seemed to get stuck in Leon's throat. For a few moments there was a toss of what to do or say. Now, wow, Walter, I don't even know how to thank you. You hold your horses there, Buster. I said it was a gift. I didn't say it was from me, he said, taking a piece of paper from the back pocket, handing it to Leon, who was even more confused before he opens the paper. Now we're even for the gift. Claire, don't make me come after you. Sherry. You suck? Hunk. Leon snorted a laugh as he closed the paper and shook his head. Of course, he muttered to himself. They asked nicely, so I couldn't refuse, Walter said. Oh, and what they asked me to do is keep you ready as your new home. Oh, I can imagine, Leon said, putting the paper in his pocket. Thanks, Walter. Well, I guess this is where we part, Ghost, Walter said, extending his hand towards Leon, who shook it and smiled on his face. And sadly we say goodbye. Leon winked, shaking his head. Goodbye? Please, Walter, you're not getting rid of me that easy. I don't need to contact you just to talk about work, he said, putting a hand on Walter's shoulder as he passed him. Walter, for his part, just stared at him, a feeling of relief on his chest. Oh, and wait, Walt? Leon asked, stopped after a few steps, turning the man, the smile still appearing on his face. You could call me Leon. He nodded again, leaving slightly stunned Walter behind. The moment Leon disappeared from his line of sight, and he smiled slightly to himself. Yeah, He was satisfied. Leon walked through the streets of his new home. As strange as this world shroud sounded, Walter didn't even let him rest at the facility for a few more days, practically kicking him out when he handed him his luggage with some clothes that he had the goodwill to buy. Dad drew the sigh from the agent. Walter was a good friend, and sometimes he didn't do enough for the man. His eyes ran around calmly while his hands remained in his pockets in his leather jacket. It had been raining in the area for a few days, and the gray skies went gray streets, and strangely gave the place a feeling of resembled comfort. He didn't know how to explain it. He lost his touch for his kind of thing. He swallowed some saliva after crossing the street, passing the front of the bakery. He didn't hide the scars on his face. He didn't think it was necessary, and frankly he was afraid of doing so and looking like he wasn't trying to change his things. Of course he would now have to deal with those stares, and he didn't know it because if he wasn't coming from there because of the scars themselves, well, both from the female and the male gazes, neither. He was practically in vain too, military for that, but their little he had done was enough to attract the attention of interested parties. He would never get used to it and put his instincts on alert. And for any case, it was a bit of a nuisance. He approached the block where his new home awaited him. Leon began to do what he always did when he arrived at somewhere new, what he had been taught to do, was almost by instinct. He scanned his eyes in every corner, every detail memorized in the establishment. Every house around, he counted the possible exits as he walked around the block, analyzed by the blind spots, the areas that he could offer the case of needed. He didn't miss a thing, from the position from the security cameras, the faces of passerbys. In addition to the bakery where he had passed before, was another bakery 2 blocks away, a corner cafe with large windows, a pharmacy across the street, a market in some 100 miles from where he was standing at the moment. An elementary school was less than 15 minutes away on foot. Despite doing what he's doing, he sighed. He didn't have to, but he knew he would have to get used to the place eventually. It seemed like he was preparing for some kind of mission, but his body moved without even him thinking. It's ridiculous, he thought to himself. This wasn't a war zone. He shook his head. After doing so, he walked towards his home. He followed the street, noticing fewer and fewer people as he walked. His instincts didn't scream, but that didn't stop his body from being on full alert, waiting for a hunter to jump out around the corner and attack him. When he reached the house, he stopped for a moment looking at the facade. In a moment of seconds, he had already identified the house's vulnerable points and the place where someone could hide. It was hard to switch off need for control. The house was a remote, and Walter said it was not too remote. Leon took a deep breath, aware that he wasn't proud of what he had become, and the constant search of danger, the inability to relax, to feel safe. He knew that this was a part of him that may never go away. When he became paranoid at some points, shaking his head, he decided just to focus on the beauty of this house for the change. The exterior was clad in white painted bricks. Contrast the wooden details and added rustic touch or something like that. The main entrance was flanked by a small porch that was wrought iron on handrails, and the solid wood door, painted soft shade of gray, that has established blasted sandglass details. It was nice, and it didn't sacrifice privacy. It was all good. The window frames were adorned with the subtle ornaments, reminiscent of classic design, but without exaggeration. The well-kept front of the garden was simple, with a few perennial plants and a small tree that offered shade. There was a gravel path leading up to the door, and next to it a discreet garage with a wooden door. The place was beautiful. He would have chosen anything better, especially since he didn't know the first thing about. He walked across the gravel to the ground and found the house. The interior of the room was predominantly neutral with tones and different textures. The walls were painted with a soft beige, matching the light wood floor. Simple but sophisticated furniture filled the space. Large, comfortable sofa lie in the middle of the front of the Morton fireplace, a bookcase full of books, and a few abstract paintings on the wall. Paintings, he had no idea what they were. There were also a small coffee table with a potted plant and some magazines. Leon looked around the room, noticing every detail, every possible point of entry and exit, as he always did. By force of habit, he walked into the kitchen, where shiny white cupboards and marble worktops contrasted with the stainless steel appliances. The place had really beautiful, but what caught his eye was the presence of someone else, sitting on one of the chairs in front of the counter. "Claire?" he called out to her. She raised her head and turned her attention from the book in front of her to him. A smile appeared on the woman's lips as she nodded briefly. "Why the surprise? Didn't Walter give you the note?" she asked, turning around towards him and crossing her legs over each other. "He did. I just didn't expect you here." This resulted in the woman arching an eyebrow. "In the house? Was that a gift?" she asked. Leon shook his head. "Not exactly. Here in London. I thought you'd be with TerraSave," he explained, and the woman arched her eyebrows briefly in understanding. "Oh, yes, and let you disappear again?" she asked in a joking tone, but frigid seriousness. "Of course, as if you didn't know where I'd be, so I wouldn't worry about any traps doing here," he said, taking a few more steps into the kitchen, coming closer. "Yes, a false door with a bottom full of spikes," Claire said, and Leon grimaced. "Come on, at least be more creative." The woman arched an eyebrow. "I don't know. Maybe a room with the iron door and a mechanism that once activated turns on a giant drill or something? Or a laser room?" This time Claire grimaced. "A giant drill?" he asked, and he shrugged with a smug expression. "Okay, I won't ask, but back to the point. Because of the destruction caused and, well, the agreements made between institutions, Chris was moved here to London, and after all that, he asked kind of nicely to me to come with him." He nodded after she explained. "It's more just like forced," he said, with a small smile, and she shrugged. "Just that detail? Besides, I told you I was going to help," she said, winking at him, who smiled and looked away, feeling his face heat up slightly. "Anyways, what did you think of the house?" Claire asked, looking around briefly. "It's wonderful. Much more than I could have asked for. Really, you didn't have to—" She interrupted him as she held up her hand, signaling him to stop. "Don't even start. First of all, you didn't have time to give me that bike earlier. And secondly, this house, or rather was, owned by the BSAA. I just pulled some strings with Chris's help and Sherry and asked please," she explained quickly. Then he snorted out a laugh. "Of course, thanks all the same, really." He even thanked her, and the smile she gave him made his heart skip a beat. "We're even," she simply replied. Leon resisted the urge to disagree. "You look so out of place. Come on, make yourself at home. It's your house," she said. With an arched eyebrow, Leon walked around the place. The kitchen was very spacious, with it clashed a little with the minimal habit. He walked over the cabinets, and what he found he was looking for. Nothing better than a cup of coffee in a cold afternoon, or so he remembered from years ago. "How was your wound?" he asked, opening the pack of coffee and pouring the powder into a plastic bowl, throwing the packet in the garbage shortly afterwards. "It doesn't even hurt anymore. I got a few stitches, but nothing major," Claire replied, watching him with certain curiosity. She was fully aware of the effects of having him, so he could hear his heart racing, skipping a beat. "And the girl? She's the one who hurt you, isn't she?" he asked, putting the water on the boil and arching the eyebrow with the electric stove. "Nadia is fine. They're doing some tests, but I think now that Wesker is dead, the chances of her suffering any mutations are low," she answered with a sigh. She was relieved, but still disgusted by what they had done to her. "Good. What about Sherry? I know she left with the BSAA. I know she's fine, but—" "Leon," Claire's firm voice interrupted him. Her tone was loud, but without anger, without sadness, without venom. Leon raised his head, looking at her with his eyebrows slightly drawn together. All the sudden call surprised him, but the woman's face, her eyes showed that something serious was coming, something that he didn't know if he was ready for. Leon, I know that things have changed again. You proved it, and I know it might feel strange at first. She began sounding a little uncertain or hesitant. Leon suppressed a sigh, his eyes staring at a few bubbles that began to rise in hot water. It's not totally strange. I'm no stranger to new beginnings. It's just different and totally bizarre, he said, searching for the best words to describe how strange he all felt. Strange but not necessarily bad. It doesn't have to be. Sherry and I will be here, and Chris and Jill. Even Parker, she said. It's just surreal. It feels like everything is no longer the way I thought it was. He said through a sigh, and he shrugged, his attention momentarily on the boiling water. In addition to the unfinished matters that I can just sweep under the rug, matters like us? Claire asked, although she didn't raise his head to look at her. His raisin heart confirmed enough. We've gotten closer lately. There's no pretending we haven't, he said, pouring 3 spoonfuls of coffee powder into the water. What are we? She asked, waiting for an answer. I don't know, he answered. Too quickly, perhaps, and Claire didn't ignore his skipping heart a beat. Don't you want to find out? She insisted. Leon lowered his head momentarily until he picked up the coffee bottle beside him and quickly washed it down the sink. It's not that I don't want to. I do, he confessed, as he poured the coffee into his bottle. Claire suppressed the stubborn little smile that wanted to appear on her lips, without much luck, but grateful that he wasn't staring at her. I just don't want to disappoint you by not being able to give you what you need. He confessed, perhaps more to himself than Claire, who in turn snorted out a small nasal laugh. Leon, how do you even know that? She asked. He shook his head and grabbed 2 cups from the cabinet. Claire, I don't even really know who I am right now. I don't even know what I just want for myself. I have no idea if I'll be able to play my part in a relationship, he said, his mouth moving a few times as he wanted to say a few more things, but his voice just wouldn't come out of his throat until he sighed and put both cups on the counter. Coffee? He poured some for himself and then one for Claire as she nodded, merely raised his cup towards her before drinking it, as she did the same. Leon arched an eyebrow and smiled in amusement when he saw the woman's slight grimace. Bitter, she muttered, pulling out the small sugar bowl. I see it's wrong in the other way, he said, taking a generous sip. I see we have a lot of work ahead of us, starting with our coffee tastes, she said a little dramatically. Sorry, but that's non-negotiable, he said, and she just rolled her eyes in good humor. It's not the question of what you can give me, Leon. We sort of this out together. You don't have to be alone, Claire said. Not in your day-to-day life, not in the moments when you feel out of place, not in your nightmares. He snorted and let out a slight laugh, drawing a glance from the woman towards him. Nightmares. I don't even know what is anymore, he said. After everything you've done and been through, you're going to tell me that you don't really have nightmares? Claire asked in disbelief. Although rare, she still occasionally relived past terrors in her dreams, sometimes about Neil's betrayal, sometimes even more rarely about Raccoon. At first, yes, but you do remember what I told you at camp, he said, looking steadily into her eyes. When you know something, you really know it. You can't stop fearing it. Claire, I don't know if there's anything in the world I'd fear. Nightmares no longer mean anything to me. He couldn't just think of whatever it was, the horde of tyrants or the isolated cult in Spain with parasites that could initiate and control armies or any book's form of biological weapons. Nothing frightened him. Okay, so all this wouldn't be a problem. What's all left is for you to allow yourself to live now, she said. Leon placed a cup on the counter, running his hand over his head shortly afterwards. His eyes met Claire's, and the intensify which he stared at the news sent shivers down her skin. The rest we can all sort out together. Do you really want this? Do you really think I deserve it? He asked. She smiled slightly, and she realized the uncertainty in his voice. Do you think I deserve a chance? I know that your heart races for certain times, she said smugly, and Leon looked at her with grimace, which drew a slight laugh from the woman. Jesus, you can hear my heart? Christ, what else? I've never asked this because I didn't think you want to talk, he asked. Sorry to tell you, but I don't think you can arrest me anymore, officer, she said, a proactive smile dawned on her lips. Right, I have the handcuffs, he said, shrugging briefly and leaning on the counter. Unfortunately for you, miss, you can't beat me anymore. The woman arched an eyebrow, but her tongue still running along her lower lip as she remembered the conversation they had had in the abandoned hotel. Her eyes shone brightly as she was struck by memories. Right, yeah, I can lift you off the ground with one arm, he said. He snorted in defiance. Please, I've dealt with much worse than that. I doubt you could take me on, she said. The eyebrow arched as the look she gave him. That sounded like an invitation to her inner need and longing. Maybe not in a fight. Her voice sounded a little hoarse, low perhaps, even a little uncertain about whether she really would say that or not. However, uncertainty she felt vanished when she heard his heart racing. I know, I really doubt. His answer made the arch both eyebrows in a pleasant surprise. Really cocky, don't you think? She asked, also leaned on the counter. You read my file, Redfield. Don't want to get me too excited, he said, noticing the way she leaned slightly towards him, noticing the way her eyes alternated between his and her lips. He was still uncertain, still wondering if it would be really something he should experience and gave himself over to. Is this the challenge, Kennedy? Her voice was no more than a whisper. Her hazy eyes focused on his. The desire was evident, but she found herself raising her arm and gripping the back of his head slightly when she saw his hesitation. Do not deny me this. He wanted her, it was clear, and she wouldn't forgive him if he turned away from her when she wanted the same thing. His eyes shone with anticipation and understanding. Without saying another word, he closed his distance between the two of them. Their lips touched an initial grunt of shock from the woman, but at moments she tightened her embrace around his neck, pulling him tightly against her. Leon raised his hand and caressed her face while exploring her mouth with his tongue. He sighed at the desire felt of her grip, and she had become the taste and he had no idea he had missed so much, until that moment was mixed with the taste of coffee. He then realized that he would be inevitably become addicted to that flavor of hers. She allowed herself to surrender to his anxiety, to which it was anxious and necessary as hers. The kiss became hotter and rougher, with every desire grew. She ran her hands down the broad back, controlling himself not to tear the lever but with her nails. Every sight she gave, every slightly caress she made on her face and neck, every moment that perhaps reflected on his desperate need, made her simply want to fit him into her arms and tear off his clothes one by one. He tasted addictively as any drink he had ever tasted. She had found himself even more and more. Bed? She asked, breathlessly, after breaking the kiss, her arms still relaxing around his neck, squeezing him as if he didn't want to let go. The sigh caused a slight shiver run down Leon's skin as he gradually began to loosen up a little more, to relax. He remembered that she just wasn't any woman, but hadn't any idea that he just didn't need to hold back, but didn't need to start that to treat her like he was going to break, made the thing throb. Too far, couch, he said, in gasp, pulling her to her needy chest kiss again. He really found himself addicted to those soft lips. Good was all she replied. A grunt of disapproval and anger had escaped her throat, and Leon defiantly pulled away, released himself from her grasp. However, she found herself even more wet at the thought of seeing such length that Leon had completely surrendered beneath her, and she felt her insides throb as she leapt over the counter and grabbed him again, lifting her easily into the arms and taking her lips in one firm movement as he made his way to the living room. His grip was firm and his arms were strong, and held her in the way that could have been mistaken for iron bars. Again, she entwined his neck with her arms and waist with her legs. A low moan escaped her mouth as she bit his lower lip, as she felt him grab her ass and squeeze it tighter as she walked in, as his other hand was still firmly around her waist, till his hand wandered back down and he leaned forward against the couch. Claire tightened her grip around her waist as she threw the cushions onto the floor. She bit his lower lip again, and she began to feel her hands firmly on her waist, gently lifting her shirt and his rough, calloused hands touching her warm skin, sending a wave of sensation coursing through her body, her skin shivering. She didn't even notice when his hands hurriedly moved to remove his jacket, tossing it into some other random corner as she arched towards him. His hands explored her body. When he managed to remove her jacket in a way that she hadn't noticed, a moan of surprise and excitement, but at the same time protest, escaped in her mouth as Leon quickly grabbed both of her hands, locked them together, and raised her arms above her head, trapping them there. Claire gasped and gave him a challenging look, which Leon turned with a smug smile before bending down and giving her neck a hickey. The action made Claire moan again in surprise, feeling her insides throb again, and she was getting what she wanted. Leon distributed a few kisses down Claire's neck, kissing and suckling and licking, the tasting of sweetness, and resisting the urge to smile when she felt her arch and move in an attempt to touch him and feel more of his touch. She grunted slightly in protest as she felt him squeeze her arms tighter when she tried to break free of his grasp. Leon's kisses began to descend. Slowly he made it the point of biting a few times, marking her pale skin and taking pleasure in the slight tremors and slights she gave. Just as he did with everything around him, he began to study her. With his free arm wandered around her waist and slowly moved proactively up just below her breasts. Claire bit her lower lip and suppressed the little moans every time he bit or licked her neck. Something seemed to notice. He continued to do the same thing as he descended. His hand had moved proactively up her body until it stopped there, and he circled the areas with his fingers, dangerously, tortuously low, which made her even more anxious from the touch that was now coming in. He seemed to be teasing her. He seemed to pick her up on frustration as he focused his eyes on hers, the sideways smiles and his lips, and his hand roamed down her back. She didn't even know if she had done this enough to have his experience, or if they trained him so that his hands were skilled with everything touched, because in a single movement, she felt her clothes were coming off, even under her shirt. Leon tossed her clothes aside, and her hand caressed under her as she kissed her neck. Claire moaned a little louder as he moved his thumb circles around her, and her body arched with every movement, where he began to play proactively with her. I can't read this. I'm sorry, people, but I can't read this. This is NSFW talk going on, and it's going into detail as to, what's actually happening with Leon and Claire. As much as I want to read this, but yeah, I can't read it. I really can't read it. So that's just all I'm just gonna say is that I can't read this part. So yeah, I'm sorry, but yeah, I just can't read this. Okay, I think we're out of that mess. The hours have passed in the blink of the eye for both of them, lost and hypnotized by each other's bodies. Without being able to, without real control, they could have loosened up within each other, but they could discover themselves to explore their bodies without fearing of overdo it. The only thing she felt the real consequence of all this was the couch. Once a new piece of furniture was now destroyed. Now that wasn't a problem. They could always buy a new one. Okay, there's more going on. Hang on. Okay. She fought against and opened her eyes, blinking a few times in confusion. The first thing she saw was Leon's neck, marks that she had left on his skin barely visible. The only light in the room was the light from the corridor that came in weakly through the ajar door. Only she did realize that she was no longer in the living room, but in the bedroom. Can't sleep anymore? Leon's husky voice made her look serene face. His trembling had been in his throat tremble in pleasurably delicious way for her. He controlled herself and just can't kiss his Adam's apple. I don't remember us coming to the bedroom, she said. settling into his arms and sinking further into the hollow of his neck. I carried you while you slept. It was better than staying on the couch, he said, and his hand roaming and caressing through her toned back, tracing his fingers of each of the muscle, feeling a few bumps and ridges that looked like scars. Ah, thank you, she said with a nasal laugh. We'll have to buy another couch. Leon merely grunted. The armchairs will do for now. The main thing now is to go to the market nearby, he said, feeling Claire's fingers run along his neck. Okay, she was loving the free vibrations his neck gave when he spoke. Do you know where the market is? She asked with her eyes still closed. I had a look around when I arrived. It's quite busy around here, he replied. You were quicker than me. I haven't seen anything of the area yet, Claire said, smiling as she felt his hand squeezed her back. Well, there is a cake shop a few blocks away, very lively. He stopped talking before he had finished, leaving his words hanging in the air. However, he didn't have to finish, and she moved gently, lifting her gaze, a smile threatening to appear on her lips. Are you asking me out, Kennedy? She asked with a certain amusement, and Leon shrugged. If you have nothing better to do, Redfield, then yes, he replied, and she whistled softly. Look at you, asking me out like a normal person. I thought you'd try one of those awful lines. A smile slowly spread across his lips, and his eyes twinkled with amusement. Since you insist, they say that nothing lasts forever. Why you being my nothing? She laughed when he said it, her body swaying next to his, who despite being more reserved, still kept the smile on his face. Ah, Jesus. Well, I guess you were right. It wasn't that bad, she said, raising her hand and resting it on his chest. I told you it was only a matter of time. You fell onto my trap, he said, and she merely snorted another laugh in response, moving her fingers across his chest, as if drawing invisible lines. What do you like to buy? She asked. The basics. Eggs, milk, fruit, vegetables, meat, and I have to check for some cleaning materials, that sort of thing, he replied. Do you know how to cook? She asked again, this time her fingers tracing Claude's scar on his chest, just above his heart. Yes. Wait, really? Of course I lived alone a long time before I met you, not to mention the times I had to hunt in the middle of a mission. Really? She laughed, when he arched an eyebrow in her direction. I'll have to taste it to believe, if it's only edible. I promise it's not lethal. We'll just do it, just for your toilet. He snorted a nasal laugh, when she patted him slightly on the arm. Alright, I accept that we're going out for breakfast tomorrow. The market, then wait? What? I don't think that far ahead. How about a movie? Sure, depending on any movies playing. I don't know if they're any good. The most interesting one I saw was the horror movie. We can watch it here. The TV is quite big. But what about the couch? They are armchairs. If you don't want the armchairs, I can take the mattress from the bed and put it in the living room. Great. Remind me to buy some more snacks at the market. Do you have a movie in mind? I'm a bit out of date with the audiovisual industry, 10 years to be precise, but there is a few I have learned about over the years, and you can show me some. Perfect. He just adjusted herself in embrace and moved her body upwards, leaving her face facing his. Her eyes looked at each other for a while letting themselves get lost in their never enjoying moment, until her hand began to move upwards. It began to caress on his cheek. Soft movements, ever so gentle, were so immediately comfy. Soon she moved up a little more with her fingers lost in the bond strands. His hair was soft as it looked, and he looked so young, so refreshed, no matter how scarred his eye and body were. Sherry cut your hair, didn't she? She asked, gently ruffling his hair with a smile. She insisted, he said, and she snorted. Sherry probably forced him. What kind of conditioner do you use? She asked, with a few seconds passed without an answer. Her eyes met again. Wait, you're not going to tell me you didn't use any, did you? Claire, it's hair. She wrinkled her nose in displeasure. What do you mean it's hair? You want to fight it? What kind of shampoo did you use? She asked, and he just shrugged. I don't know. I just know it doesn't smell. Sometimes I wash with soap. She blinked in disbelief, with her eyes flashing revolt. You're telling me you wash your hair with that cheap shampoo hotel and the same soap you wash your, well, you know what with? The line drew you amused smile from him, which contrasts sharply with her fierce expression. Yes? Ah, that's not fair, she exclaimed loudly. What? We women buy and use countless products to have silky hair. Do you have any single conditioner or quality cream costs? Not to mention shampoo, while you men wash your hair once a week with the 3-in-1 shampoo with the kind of hair to envy, Leon. Do you know what some women would do if they have hair like yours? She grumbled, running both of her hands through her hair, who just stared at her with an arched eyebrow and a yellow smile on his face. Look at it, Silky, she exclaimed. Impossible. Tell me your secret. Show me the way. Maybe I will, for a while. The words made her focus on him again, that gleam of good humor, disappearing in the blink of an eye, given away to a glint of seriousness. What do you mean, for a while? She asked in a dangerous voice. It's not a mission or anything like that. I mean, it's more of a personal goal, I'd say. He explained himself, noticing her gaze soften, but dangerously serious. You know, at the beginning, I was taken away when you left you alone. I think I passed some kind of test before I could start training, he began, his eyes not meeting hers, but fixated the spot on the blanket. He didn't notice her alternative listening to him to talk about the past. The test was simple. 3 jars, 15 participants. Whoever got all the free vials to the laboratory would be the winner. The strongest I was so scared. If I fail, I would die, and so would you and Sherry. But everyone who's come to the island wanted to kill me for vials, and at that time, I never want to kill anyone. His hand passed gently over a scar of his torso, and his eyes finally met Claire's, who listened patiently for what he wanted to say, her eyes gazing at him with tenderness and warmth that he could spend a lifetime there too. There was this Russian guy in military. I after learned his name was Vasily. He accepted the contract for the test, and his daughter Lisa had been taken by Umbrella, and he saw the opportunity to get her back. Unfortunately, we fought and I killed him. He closed his eyes momentarily. It had been a long time since he had thought about it, or about those men, or about the test in general. It was easier that way, and he had believed for a long time, and it had no longer meant anything. But at first he felt so guilty, so responsible for it. Perhaps it was from then on that he began to fight for something other than safety of those 2 girls. I got his file later. I found out about his daughter and his ex-wife on a mission to South Korea. I raided an Umbrella laboratory and I killed all the infected scientists. Everyone had managed to get to the computers and got the information I was after. It was only that I discovered that one of the infected I killed was actually his daughter. I didn't feel bad. She was already gone, but... A sigh escaped his lips. He thought about it for a few moments of how to continue. Anyway, some points I had learned about what his ex-wife had spent during the time to find out where his daughter were. She tried everything from posters to blogs to hiring private detectives. I asked Walter to sort of things out for me. Among them, the records of both Lisa Vasily and as well as evidence of her deaths. It's not much, but I thought I'd at least put an end to their endless search, he finished, feeling Claire's arm entwined with his neck, and her hand gently squeezed his arm. He looked up at them at that kind, sympathetic eyes, and she smiled as he felt his distress and his chest subside, at least a little. That's very noble of you. How long have you been thinking about this? She asked, as she held back a slight grunt when she pulled away slightly from her embrace and opened the drawer next to him. For a while, he said, turning around and saw Glare focus on the items on his hands, a combat knife and a badge. Remember? He asked as he extended the knife towards her, despite her confusion. She took the blade still in his shelf and ran her eyes along the handle, focusing on the 2 letters at the base. Marvin? She asked in surprise, and he shook his head. Lieutenant Marvin Brannan. I asked for his file shortly after I started my training. I kept the knife that he gave me, and the organization got the badge, along with some items that the support team had managed to salvage at the time. He had a wife at the time and 2 young children, a boy and a girl. The day at the field city where he stayed. Today, the youngest girl is in college and the oldest is in his 3rd semester of law school. He had fingers along with the handle of the knife, looking at it with a certain nostalgia and sadness. Sometimes, very rarely, he thought about Raccoon. He thought about all the things he saw, and the people he saw. Sometimes he even wondered if there was anyone in the world who still remembered some of them. Ben, Elliot, he remembered their names. All he saw at the police station, he would never forget them. Even the rest of the world did. I would have asked several times if I just gave this back. I never come up with the answer, but now, it's something I'd like to do. Even perhaps I'm just opening old wounds, he said, picking up both objects and placing them on the created world again. Well, that's great, Leon. I also think you should. And if you need company, I'd say I help you. She pulled the scruff of his neck again, and he responded with a gentle hickey at the side of her neck. Thanks. What about your family? She asked, probably thinking it was a very delicate subject for him. But at first he didn't show any kind of reaction, until he grunted and pulled her towards him, stealing a kiss from her lips. I'll leave that for the future. He looked out the window, first rays of sunlight still nowhere in sight. We've got a few hours till dawn, but I think I want my breakfast early. He said that as they continued to make their passionate love together. Now, I already reviewed this when this one wasn't finished at the time, but now that it's finished, I'm finally going to do a full review on this, well, pretty much in this story. Now, this story obviously was a pretty good one. I personally really enjoyed it. I definitely really have to say it's definitely a pretty good one. I mean, there was a lot of great concept when it came to this story. I personally really enjoy, the concept of it. I really thought this was really good and well made. I could definitely say this was definitely a really interesting and really good concept. I mean, this story was written by LouizSt. That was the story, my choice. I definitely really have to say it was definitely really interesting. I personally really enjoyed it a lot. Now there is the final chapter, there was some NSFW scene, so I had to pretty much censor and skip parts of the last chapter. But anyway, I thought that this was a pretty good story, but I personally liked it a lot. So anyway, I guess with that being said and that being the case, like I'm always gonna say, this is just simply my own personal opinion, and if you happen to disagree with it, that's perfectly fine too. We're all entitled to our own opinions regards to these stories. This is just simply my own personal thoughts. Now, I'm gonna sit here and say right now that I give the story a 10 out of 10. It's a really great one. I personally liked it. I thought it was really neat, and I personally really enjoyed it. I thought it was really neat and well done. So I guess with that being said, and with that being the case, I'll leave a link to the description for this story, so if you guys want to go check it out, you can. And yeah, like I'm gonna say, yeah. What did you guys personally think of this story? Did you enjoy it? Did you not? Also, what you have done personally to help make this story a lot better? Feel free to let me know what your thoughts are down in the comment section down below. I'm Shadow the Lion Queen. Thank you so much for watching today's video, and if you enjoy this channel, leave a like, comment, and subscribe if you're new. Ring the bell for notifications to when I upload, that way you guys will not miss an upload. As always, if you want to go follow me on sites like Blue Sky, DeviantArt, and Twitter, links to those will be in the About page section, so you guys can go follow me on there if you want. Also, don't forget to, subscribe to my backup channel known as Miss Dark Shigo, as link to that will also be in the About page section. And that's pretty much all I have to really say, but if I'm missing something, please let me know what it is. And as always, I'll be catching you guys all in the next video. Peace out, and like always, roll the outro, because I'm out. What's up, my pretties? It's the Lion Queen here. I want to appreciate you all for tuning into this video. And I do appreciate you guys supporting my video by giving this video likes and stuff. If you really enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like, comment and subscribe if you're new, ring the bell for notifications to when I upload, so that way you guys will get updated for whenever I upload. If you want to follow me on Twitter or DeviantArt, feel free to leave a follow on those if you are interested in following me on those socials. If you want to support my backup channel, known as Miss Dark Shigo, feel free to subscribe to it, as a link to that will also be in the About page section. And with that being said, and that being the case, thank you so much for watching, my pretties, and as always, please stay pretty.